Season 3.
All right.
Misfits Social Podcast.
Welcome.
Good to be back.
Sweet.
And we are live recording at, where are we at?
The Greystone Castle.
The Greystone
Adventure Center.
Feels like Europe, right?
Beautiful
the
place.
name.
Mm-hmm.
Who would have
But
thought
it's not.
this in Texas?
Yeah, west-ish.
Greystone Castle does not sound like a place you would have cactus everywhere.
All I could think of as a child is,
Cacti.
by the power of Grayskull, I am He-Man. I'm sorry.
Wow. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. It's a little bit before your time, but I actually played with He-Man when I was little.
Oh.
It's Greystone, not Grayskull.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was playing with Tinker Toys and
Yeah. His were just made out of wood.
G.I.
and
Joe,
sticks.
man. Come on.
He had toys that were just sticks and twine wrapped
yeah,
together.
Yeah.
I was outside. I was outside. I don't know what y'all were doing. Riding my bike.
Yeah, Native American toys, bundled together in the frontier, like anything he could find outside of the wagon when they would stop.
So tell me,
That throw you off a little bit there, bro?
Downhill quick.
Yeah.
We'll stay on the notes.
Yeah.
Tell me something that has offended you personally.
Oh, offended me?
Yeah,
I
offended.
wasn't ready for that. I was thinking more about
I know.
like.
And you're saying
throwing
besides both of you.
Yes, besides
Yeah. Gotcha.
besides both of us, or for Paul, my language at times.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm taking that one off
Or
because
Paul's
that would be an
age
easy,
for us.
Yes,
Right.
correct. Yeah.
Mm.
Tell me something that you're like, yeah, that offended me. I found that extremely offensive.
I got
That is
nothing.
a great, yeah.
I don't live offended,
Yeah, we're so above
basically.
it.
Yeah.
No, when's the last time you were offended, Paul? When's the
I
last
don't know. When's the
time you
last
were
conversation
furious?
I had with my wife? What was
Right,
that?
yeah, exactly.
Uh-oh.
3
This
hours.
episode just became a marriage episode.
Yes. Next episode is
I'm
how
trying
to
to
get
remember the last
yourself out of
time
a
I
hole.
was really butthurt. About something. Talking about just, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Or it
about
just
a-
rubs you the wrong way.
About
I think it was in
about
traffic.
about
I
a
don't.
subject.
I don't really like people saying about my beard. Any Santa Claus reference.
Okay.
I get kind of butthurt about that, and I just go ahead and tell them. I say, "Well, that's not what I'm going for." I just go ahead and say it because
Then they say, well, you accomplished it, though. Right?
they're like, "Sorry, man."
I'm so sorry, but you did
so
good.
sorry.
You did good in that area. No. When was the last time you was really? That was probably just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I mean, a typical offense for me is around my height.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought it was some kind of a restaurant deal because you kind of have little issues at restaurants, right?
No, I used to as a young man.
Used to.
That's just because I was
That
an
was
asshole.
then.
That's just because I was an asshole. I wasn't really offended.
Yeah.
But like for real, genuinely, like my height. I mean, I say I'm 5'8", but I'm really only 5'7" and a half. And I take every half inch I can get. And yeah, so anytime somebody's like, the little guy or short guy or whatever,
That's not
I'm just
right.
like, what? And they may have just not even been meaning that. It just like doesn't sit well.
I was always sensitive about my ears. I had to grow into my ears. So I got called Dumbo a lot growing up. That's right. Somebody just recently called me Dumbo.
No.
I don't even think it was about my ears, but all the trauma from my childhood was attached to that. I was like, who are you calling Dumbo? And now, I mean, I've outgrown my ears.
Yeah.
Put it that way. I've outgrown them. You know what I mean?
Did you ever get wingnut?
Wingnut, yeah, satellite dish boy. He goes, I bet you can hear space, because you satellite dish boy with satellite dish ears. Yeah, I heard it all, but my ears stuck out pretty bad. So
Okay, so one good one I had on that is a guy came up to me and asked me one time where I got my big schnoz.
What?
And
That is so rude. I cannot believe it.
I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. That
Where'd you get your flat one?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe he's talking about something else. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, that ski slope on the front of your face.
oh my goodness,
Man.
dang!
Wow.
People can be brutal.
And I was
man.
just like, okay, yeah, I'm going to walk away on that one. Like,
Yeah, you just reminded me of another one. So mountaineering and climbing, I love to do that. But there's a couple people they're looking at me like, man, I wouldn't want to belay you. Like if I fall,
Right, yeah.
you're killing somebody.
Yeah.
It's like if I fall, like they're going to take a ride.
Yeah, it's going to be like,
You're going to be going over the moon.
Well, you got to be like this big or something to be a
I don't
mountain
know.
guy.
Yeah, but that's kind of bugged me a little bit.
they got to
I'm
be
like,
anchored.
Yeah, they have to be anchored, which
yeah.
they should be anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one's kind of bugged me. Just anything related to me being gigantic for climbing.
So I was listening to some articles or listening to some podcasts, reading a few articles on a fence recently. And it seems like a fence over the last several years has become a thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like somebody coming up to me saying, hey, you got a ski slope on the front of your face. That's pretty pretty point blank, right?
Yeah.
But what are some stories that you've been hearing lately? I mean, even go back a couple years. I don't know if COVID made us more sensitive to some things like that, but let's just kind of give me one, like, dude, this offense stuff is just getting a little bit over the top.
I was reading an article about this lady. She was talking about chickens. She's raising chickens, right? And they've become laying hens. But then she got into the whole deal about how that eggs that are hatched that are not hens, they basically just take all of them and grind them up. They just, it's like chicken side or whatever, they just take them out and grind them up and kill them. And so she was like, it was a whole article in New York Times about ovo, some kind of like they can scan the egg and figure out if it's going to be a male or female. And so they can determine
and this
in
is
advance.
Before it ever hatches.
Yes, so they can, make that one like goes to your breakfast, as opposed to grinding it up afterwards. And I'm like, really? I mean, and it was millions of dollars that they were putting into this because people are real sensitive about the feelings of chickens. That was pretty. She was offended. She was really.
So she was upset that the chickens were going before
that
they
the
ever
male
hatched?
chickens were getting, if they hatched and they weren't hens, laying hens, and they weren't really good for eating, they just ground up the little, the little hatchlings or whatever. Yeah,
I thought that was just chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
I swear I found a beak in a chicken nugget one time.
No, get out.
I bet you.
At least a toenail. What
Pink-
about you?
Pink goop.
What's some?
But I just couldn't believe like a whole article on.
And
she
in
was
the New
really
York
been out
in
of
the
shape.
New York Times.
Right.
Yeah.
Been out of shape.
Man, I would just throw out just this whole ridiculous concept of microaggressions.
Okay.
Where it's not even the thing that you're doing. It's this subtle, unconscious thing that you're setting up a potential aggression towards someone because we're so hypersensitive to anything that might offend us. Right. So, yeah, those things make people constantly posture in a way of like, man, I have no idea what's going to set you off. And you just think the culture really has, I think it's kind of moving maybe back from that, but there for a while here about 5 to 6 years ago, that whole idea of like, what might I do? Even though I'm trying so hard to not be offensive, every single thing could be taken to mean that I am subconsciously. And I just haven't done enough work inside of me to make sure I'm not sending all these microaggressive signals.
Toward who? Like, you mean like racial things or
it
more
can,
like...
Well, I'm saying it can be across the gamut. There's racial microaggressions, there's gender microaggressions, there's LGBTQ I mean, you name it, there's no limit because it's anything that I find from you that's suggestive of you not tolerating me or potentially just setting me off.
Like me staring at that girl that is now a guy that has
that's a micro,
like facial hair that is I'm trying to figure out.
Absolutely. Yeah, just staring too
Microaggression,
long could absolutely be a microaggression. It's whatever somebody decides it
Mess
is.
up
Really.
the pronoun game.
Yeah, misgender someone.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's under 100 milliseconds, our brain, and you go look at the neurobiology on this, right? Our brains are always trying to figure out somebody's gender pre-conscious.
Well,
you might get it wrong.
I saw a video the other day. This is going to offend Paul. I saw a video the other day of an old timer, and they were like, well, sir, how do you know you're a man? He said, well, I have a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it kind of does
me.
it, right? Yeah.
I'm glad he does.
Yeah. Happy for you, man.
I'm happy for him.
So I think
Go
about
you.
like Dave Chappelle is one of my favorite comedians. And I think about back when he was on Comedy Central. Like, dude, some of the stuff that was on there, I mean, oh my God. I mean, there were times I felt uncomfortable and it wasn't even about like my background or anything like that. And now you fast forward to where he's at on his Netflix documentaries, where I don't really feel like he's pushing the envelope that much. I feel like he's pretty embracing guy. But then he gets all this pushback about trying to get canceled because of some of the transgender type things. And for me, it's just like, it's very, very tiring, especially whenever we're coming against comedy, which is designed to like push the boundaries.
Right.
Like you want to push the envelope.
Like everybody's open season in comedy. And then all of a sudden there's a category of people that aren't open season. I mean, we're all open season, you know?
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about what do we feel like are the drivers behind where that is coming from? Like, what do we feel like that is rooted in? Is it a new thing? I mean, for me, it feels somewhat new. But maybe there's a little bit of rooting in throughout history to where, I don't know. What do you think, Royce?
Man, I don't want to paint too broad a picture or take too long on this, but I would say I think it's roots in this modern idea that feeling bad or having or experiencing discomfort is like a right. I have a right to never be uncomfortable. I have a right to be in a position where you never make me feel uncomfortable. And I think, and it really for me, like, and it comes from our prosperity. It comes from our opulence. It comes from so many breakthroughs, so many conveniences, so much technology. Like those are positive, good things. But the side effect of that is we start realizing that human history up until this point has had a lot of awful struggle to get it to where it is. And we've had breakthroughs. I'm so thankful. But I think somewhere there's this side effect or an expectation that with all this benefit, I shouldn't feel uncomfortable. And I don't want to feel uncomfortable, meaning like offense, I think sometimes is just simply confused for you just made me feel bad.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like superficial. What if it's just you're confronting what I believe about myself or about something? Like some people just don't want you to ever push back on their ideas or their, position.
Well, and I'd argue because they just don't want to feel bad. It's easier if we all will agree, or let's never talk about anything that brings a sense of discomfort, which I think we can get to it in a little bit maybe, but we're less resilient. Our culture's less resilient. We don't know how to, and I would say the idea is bounce back. If we, a conversation might drop my joy if it's a tough conversation, but I have capacity to bounce back to get to that joy state. I think we're losing some of that.
So maybe we're talking about a couple different layers in here as well. So one thing, like if we said coaching, if you're playing a sport and you're going to be coached, right? You're going to
what kind of coach do you get?
Yeah, correct. You're going to need, if you want to just get a participation trophy and not really win a championship, then you're going to want a coach who's not really going to tell you, hey, you kind of suck at batting.
Right.
Like you've struck out literally the last 10 games in a row.
Right.
So coaching, there's a little more than a little bit of like rub, push, iron sharpening iron, whatever we're talking about. You're going to have somebody that's kind of calling you up to another level. I think what you're touching on in the microaggression gets into maybe a little bit more of the us and them and the victim or the victimology type.
It sure can. I mean, it leads to that. I just thought it would be worth the reason offense is we have an offense addiction, I would argue.
Okay.
And I think it's born out of the seed of, we assume that our lives should not have very much discomfort. That's kind of what technology is always promising, is that we're never going to feel discomfort, but at anything we're going to be great at, playing the piano, you're going to suck at it. If you want to be a great basketball player, you're initially going to suck, and you're going to need someone to tell you where you stink, and it's going to be discomfort to enter into greatness. But I just think the capacity to weather discomfort on the way to greatness is being lost to some degree. And so I think kind of a side effect of that is that we're so easily offended. If you've made me feel bad or our interaction caused me to feel any discomfort, well, now I can run to outrage. And outrage actually in the brain releases a dopamine hit. So we get a reward feeling about becoming righteous in our indignation or feeling a bit of emotional certainty. And I know we could go off into the deep end here, but I'll just say this: in a world that's filled with more uncertainty than we keep trying to become certain, but we actually have more uncertainty.
Yeah.
There's a little more ambiguity about things than ever before. So that righteous outrage gives us a sense of certainty about something.
Yeah.
It becomes addictive.
The whole thing that happened, not too long back when Trump and Zelensky met, and he just, the way J.D. Vance and Trump treated him, I thought was such bad, decorum. It was just, not presidential. And then just what was said. My first reaction was I was angry. I just got so angry. Went on the internet and I started searching, for things that people are saying about this. And the first guy I found, man, he used expletives all the way through, and he was just raging, like you were saying. He was just going crazy. And I'm like, yeah, But then the more I kind of research and everything, well, then I had to kind of modify just a little bit some of my anger because there was some pushback, and a lot of logic that I missed,
There's some more facts around some of that. I'm not saying I'm on one side or the other, but there were more facts that I found to some of that than I had realized to begin with.
Because I was on the opposite side of it. When I saw Zelensky speak out, I'm like,
yeah,
no, I think you've forgotten who the swinging dick is in the room, for lack of a better term.
yeah, but
seriously.
to me, they were all should have been aligned on the same side.
Well, and
Putin,
they were the whole thing was prepped, and then Zelensky just went on his own.
Yeah, he made a power
and
play.
He tried to make a power play, and J.D. Vance spoke up and was like, "Nah, not today, buddy. After we've been writing you all these checks, like."
Yeah. So there were many sides to it, and I think this is what people are unable to do is get any pushback at all on where they stand on things, and so they just rage. And you're like, it's like a sense of a righteousness, like a righteous indignation.
Yeah.
So if we just kind of use the Zelensky Vance scenario, it's a real situation because lives are at stake.
Well, and I had bias too,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people in that world. And so my bias also filtered through the people that I know that are damaged and hurt and killed and, all of that. So my bias.
You have Ukrainian family.
Come on now.
You've done
Let's
so
talk
much
about
work
it.
there too. Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's two things that really matter: is their lives that are being lost, and from an American perspective, there's a lot of tax dollars that are being spent to keep that war going on, right? And so that's something that's very passionate. I think another thing that can be very passionate is like what we believe, and I think that's where we're trying to touch on about the righteous indignation a little bit, and just so we're playing fair here with any kind of commentary. For me, what we came out of, I used to have a lot of righteous indignation. Like I would be so convinced that I was right on something that I could just be not
write people off. Yeah.
Yeah. Not necessarily at the restaurant. Like I said, I was just an asshole about that, but about things that I believe. Like, let's talk about whenever the gentleman I feel like it was in Colorado, but when he wouldn't make the cake for the gay couple, right? At that time where I was at in my life, I was championing him, like, oh yeah, and hindsight, it's like, is that really the hill
you want to die on?
That's the mountain you want to die on, is like, I'm not going to bake a cake for these guys. So my question then would be, if we're getting to the place where we have this righteous indignation, and then that is coming to a place to where we're having anger and we have this addiction to offense, whether it's because you use the wrong pronoun or because of this or the microaggressions or whatever it is. How do we drill down into what is causing that? Because like, if you think back about for the way I would have believed, I would have said I was doing that for moral good.
Well, is there ever a time?
But it's not.
Is there ever a time though to rage with justice? I mean, and rage justly.
I would think so. I
mean,
would think so that there are right.
Yeah, I mean, I get it that you have to listen to all sides. Like my first reaction was, we're an unfaithful ally, for instance. In that whole situation with the Ukraine. I mean, are we an ally or we're not an ally? Because I just looked at it on the surface of what happened there, and I felt like he was treated badly.
Yeah.
But that was just my initial reaction, and it was a sense of justice based around an idea that we were an unfaithful ally. Are we fighting with them or are we not,
Yeah.
I would say unexamined outrage is
go.
probably always going to be somewhat toxic. Not to say that even sometimes an unexamined outrage, like a broken clock's right twice a day. So I might actually land in a good spot on that issue automatically. But I think overall, are we so certain? And I would call it just from I need to go theological. I was trying to find a way to not be theological.
No,
and
you
it's
can
like,
go ahead.
I'm
going to try not to be offended by that, but go ahead and take it there.
Well, I was trying to find a more benign way to say it, and I think the worship of certainty and worship is just you put the highest value in it for those that may not believe, is this idea that I am right. I think we should always hold even deeply held truths with a bit of humility and a bit of even caution, meaning like I really care about this, but I'm open to learning more about it. For example, let's go back to our Zelensky. We're in a world where, unlike any moment in human history, people have their own set of facts, and algorithms and AI are handing you the snippets of a conversation that you might, if you saw all 5 or 10 minutes of it, might feel totally different. But you have the 30 seconds that will confirm your bias. So I would say let's hold loosely to things that we feel certain about, not because we can't be certain, but we don't want to worship it. We don't want to get so attached that we can't learn more.
We talk about theology. What about Jesus when going in the temple and turn a bunch of tables upside down? You know what I mean?
Well, I think that just the Jesus piece of things is absolutely, every time he gets a dumb dichotomy presented to him, he shows that there's an absolutely separate way than the two ways we've split it.
To think about it, yeah.
And we are in a polarity. There's a positive, negative, whichever one that is for whoever it is. What if there is a third path? I won't ever find it if I'm so certain that my positive or my negative is the best way, or that I'm right and you're wrong and you're the enemy. And
so many things are in tension too. I mean, they don't just clear up either. Just because you have conversation and you drill down on it doesn't mean that the tension clears and there becomes an apparent right or wrong in a situation.
Be willing to dwell in the tension. I think that's a part of at least examining your certainty, examining your outrage. You might feel outrage. Let's examine it before you act on it or display. If you have that, sometimes it happens quick, but try to be a person of a bit of regulation and restraint and saying that just pissed me off. But before I bite someone's head off, let me work through this for a second for the greater good of myself, my family, my humanity, what I might put on display. And let me look at that certainty. Let me examine my bias. Let me see, is there something else? Let me dare to empathize for a moment. I can have my feelings, but what was it like for that person to be where they are? Just try to look out of their eyes. Yeah.
It seems that when people can bluster and just get louder.
What do you mean?
Yeah, they're not truly confident in what they believe. They just have to win, or whatever. They want to, like you said, worship the certainty. So they bluster
So there's a deeper value of like, I'm not always going to be friends with everybody, but I would be open. I'm open to being a friend with anybody. Meaning, I don't want to conquer every person. I'm not looking at everyone either to be a 100% ally or someone that I conquer. I also might want to just learn from this person and come to understand where they're coming from. Just finding room to find harmony with people instead of feeling like if they don't agree or they represent the other side, they need to be conquered.
Yeah.
That's objectifying.
Generally speaking, for real, people are doing about the best they can for their history and all the factors that brought them where they are.
Yeah.
You know, truly, if you really understood, you would empathize how people arrive at ideas, and you wouldn't get all judgy.
I love it.
You know, you would be able to have a conversation, and it's not up to you anyway. What just because you bluster and feel like you're right, is that what's going to change them? You know,
And just in
probably
this
not.
modern era, a little more compassion when you might be just set off by something stupid someone said.
Right.
And it could really be a dumb thing they said. Careless, calloused. Just a moment of compassion to say this person has likely been shaped algorithmically by their own set of facts.
Yeah.
And not that I have to sit and be best buddies with them, but just for a moment to realize more and more am I going to have conversations with people who all they are seeing is what they already think about something.
Yeah.
And is there a window?
And I can't remember if it was on another episode of the pod, but at one point we've had a discussion about, I think we called it affluenza, like because of the affluence that we have going on. You go to third world countries where you're kind of living in community, you're living in a village, and in the experiences that I've had when I've been there, you are reliant on the person next to you. So there's a certain amount of, well, I don't want them to be they can kind of be my frenemy a little bit. Like we may not see eye to eye, but I need them because maybe they have a certain craft or a certain trade or a certain thing
There's
that
interdependence.
there's an interdependence to that. I'm wondering from a socioeconomic standpoint, the way we have become so affluent, well, you don't have to rely on anybody to be able to survive in the Western world. So you can F you buddy, whoever it is, because I'm not going to need you. One of the things that I love about Warren Buffett is he has a quote that he says over and over and over again. He never wants to make enemies in business in any way, shape, or form, because he's an acquisitions guy. He's like, I never know when I'm going to turn around and maybe want to buy that business, or maybe I need to hire them or do whatever. So I think he has an understanding from a business perspective of, hey, I may not necessarily agree with you on everything, but I still kind of need you. And I think maybe subconsciously our lack of need causes us to devalue the person next to us. And then it's just on this kind of like moral standard or whatever. And that can be, I mean, everybody knows that can be all across the board, from whether your pronoun game is at all-star level or you just call everybody he and she. So when it comes to that from a cultural perspective, let's just dive into, is there anything going on like in our mind and in our hearts? We touched on morality just a little bit. What is the guide that kind of moves us through this whole addiction to offense, to be able to just be like, I can get in Paul's face and be like, you know, you're wrong. You shouldn't be able to speak at this event. You know, you've done this, you've done that. Kind of getting into the shout down thing. You got a pretty shady past and a beard like Santa Claus. So,
that wasn't what I was going for.
That was a low blow. Wow.
What do you want me to say?
I got caught up in it.
I don't know,
that was
man.
just like the living algorithm right then. I just got caught up into it with my own set of facts.
I love you both in spite of it.
We love you, Paul. Restate that question.
That was a long one. That's half a podcast what he went through.
Yeah, how do we navigate? Because there is an aspect. It's more than we can really talk about at this moment. But, okay, with the demise of, to some degree, over the last couple of decades, of the centrality of church or the centrality of religion for a lot of Americans, we And again, I don't
As a
have
mooring for truth is what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't have time to unpack this in the way I'd like to. I'm just saying there's a lot of assumptions I'm making, but I can support those assumptions. We'll do it on another pod, right? But all I'm saying is we are moral creatures. Human beings are moral creatures. They judge. They define good. They define bad for themselves or for people important to them. And a lot of times we tribally congregate around similar definitions of that. That's working out in this outrage culture. It's a new expression of morality. The problem is I think it's mob leaning. It's algorithmically being defined because of the demise of some classic institutions that helped. And I'm not saying that didn't need to shift to some degree. It's just because it has, morality is working its way out in human beings in ways they feel positive to express it. And right now it's got an outrageousness to it. It's outrage. It's offense. This is in that soothing to that need to define right and wrong within human beings. So I think addressing that.
So you're saying that you feel like that is genetic?
No, he's saying this is
A
social
the moral
construct.
code. Like us
that
being
part, yeah.
moral beings, you're saying you believe that's genetic.
Yeah, I think it's to the bone. We'll be around any human for any long time, any length
It's just
of time.
that people are different
And
social playbooks.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
And so what happens, like all wars are really conflicting definitions of good and evil to some degree. All conflict is some butting of heads between those codes.
That's fair.
And then I would say this offense addiction that we're talking about today is another modern expression of what we think that is. Like all the way to a microaggression. How could you? That's bad. It's another way to try to define that.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? What's the way out? Is just like be aware of the forces that are at work right now and not just get swept into it. Like I want to examine my bias as much as I'm capable. And that's going to be in community to some degree. Just before I act on outrage or I get addicted to outrage, I just want to think about my bias. What story am I a part of? Because that template of story is going to cause me to react to anything, or I'm going to put you in a place in that story. I'm going to fit people in places in that story so that it can bring on that confirmation.
I mean, what's the purpose of your rage too? I mean, is it just that you're offended by somebody, an affront to your whatever your mental construct of what is right and wrong,
Yeah.
or if you really care to change society and for good, for what you feel is good, nobody is changed by being getting yelled in their face. Really,
No.
I mean, they just aren't. Logic would be better, love would be even better, empathy, things like that. If you truly care to change. If you're just yelling from the other side of the street, nothing really
that's
gets
dehumanizing
accomplished.
because we turn a human into an object. But love, right, which would be the pros, it can still disagree, but it doesn't lose value of another human being and their point of view. So if you can promote that, I think we're on a better foot automatically than dehumanizing you because you said something I don't like.
Yeah. So let's just back up for a second on the coaching piece, because Royce, you're helping us at Tunco right now with coaching, and we did some work already. And one of the things that came up, Nick Saban is national championship coach over and over and over again. Paul, I know you're an Ohio State guy, so sorry about to bring up the SEC guy,
Yeah.
but
much stronger conference.
Well, we did win, but anyway, go ahead.
yeah,
I
you
mean,
did.
every
You
now
did.
and then. Every
I'm
now
giving
and then.
you props
That's true.
on that.
I know.
Yeah, you did win.
It's
You
bad
did win.
timing,
Yeah,
right?
it
It's
was,
bad
yeah.
timing.
Yeah. But if you watch a lot of not his leadership videos, like where he's given leadership
Speeches,
speech
yeah.
per se, but if you watch a recording of his practice, you're like, oh my God. I mean, the intensity level is through the roof. I mean, when we talk about yelling
demanding.
or dehumanize, I mean, like there's times I'm like, oh my God, I'm glad I'm not the guy out on the field getting yelled at like that. But we talked about that at Tunco a little bit with the coaching atmosphere. And, he only has those players for so long. It's a short stint. But I think that's what you see on camera, and you see that in a practice schedule. But that's not who he is all the time.
Right.
right? So what I'm getting at is, you asked Paul a while ago, is there a time for that kind of,
I think you have to have relational equity. You have to have built some kind of a bridge of relational equity to say something hard to deserve to say something hard to somebody.
That's really good. And if we look at it from some of the neuroscience stuff that I love,
yeah,
I want to get your joy high. So joy in the brain, we've said this before, is I'm happy to be with you, and you would have joy if you were happy to be with me. If the joy's high, so a good coach would see we're at high joy, I can spin some of that. So I might drop your joy to hit you hard with some truth from a coaching standpoint, or we need to talk. But at the same time, it would be in between little snippets or clips that we want to get that joy back up. And I think that's good coaching. But we have to have a bond.
It's like the difference between hurt and harm, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yes. I can hurt you if I'm for you.
Right.
It might hurt.
Yeah.
It's like a doctor and a surgery or whatever. Yeah. But to harm is to do lasting damage. You're not seeing the treasure in somebody. You're just writing them off. Right. I mean, that's a different kind of rebuke or whatever, rebuttal.
And that goes back to the relational equity that if you're playing for Saban on the Alabama
there's been a
team,
pre-agreement.
Correct.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you come into that, if you're a player, you come into that relationship with the expectation that this is going to be intense. Like, probably when I go to practice, we're going to get our butts worked off. Yeah. And there's going to be some yelling, and maybe the yelling may be at me.
Well, and then what we found, all healthy coaching, and what others have found, but I'm saying, like, I've read the research, is healthy coaching, even tough coaching, comes from a group identity. And so when you go to Bama, there is a set roll tide tradition, especially what Nick Saban created. You're assuming an identity that we are this. We do things this way. And you correct to that. And so when sometimes we don't have that. If you just correct me with no group identity, it's almost impossible for me to manage that with good joy, because it feels so personal. Yeah. And again, because it goes back to, and I know we're a little seeming almost convoluted, but it goes back to that collectivist mindset in other parts of the world we've lost in our hyper individualism or our affluency. We've gotten to where we don't depend on each other. We don't even see an us in it. So when we do correct or we give feedback, it seems like you're just targeting me. But if you watch Nick, he's saying, no, this is who we are. Now here's your part in it. Rise to who we are.
We started out talking about offense. And so somebody in that environment that then is offended, they're not going to last.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not going to last.
Because you're not tied material,
So then if we stick with that theme, the relational equity then does need to be there. You asked, is there a right time to raise the level of intensity? You didn't say it like that, but I think that's what, from the aggression.
Like to be, or to rage.
Yeah, right. I think if the relational equity is there, then that can be done. But what happens if you've made the investment, the relational equity is there, and then the person is still just like, yeah, this just isn't for me?
Well, is it about the person that you care about, and is it about them, or is it about you? Is the whole reason that you feel this need to rage over something or call it right or wrong, is it about them? Are they harming themselves? Or is it just somehow offending you? If it's just offending you, well, then just suck it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But is it worth a confrontation if another person's being harmed? Then I think you're either protecting someone or protecting the very person. Then it's worth the risk of a hard conversation.
It's worth noting,
yes,
that high joy, we're happy to be together. Then that relational equity is a bond that's made from high joy. We bond with people we like being around. So whatever you're talking about, that's the next step. High joy leads to bonding. Then there's a group identity developed from that bond. Now, it could be your football team. It could be your neighborhood. It could be any number of things. But who are we? Not just me. Who are we? Then the correction and coaching, if it's done effectively to where you it's not outrage. It's not us versus them. It's not enemy mode, as it's called by Dr. Wilder.
Well, it would be like somebody coming back to a neighborhood that they grew up in that was impoverished, and they made it out of that neighborhood, and they see kids doing things that are not going to help them go forward, and they come in with some relational
There you
equity and credibility, and they say something that would be impossible for other people to say
Absolutely.
because they're in the tribe.
Yeah.
And they look at that person going, wow, that's a hero. You're
Right.
one of us. You know the streets.
Right.
Like
So
I
you
do.
got the empathy piece, you got
Exactly.
the high joy piece.
And then I'm only just laying out a blueprint I've learned for the ability to be upset about something, but it not be devastating.
Or it's not even your place to say.
Yeah.
Maybe you just need to shut up.
But to Royce, to your point, the microaggressions that you were mentioning at the very beginning, that's where people are bringing a certain expectation of disagreement and confrontation to the relationship. So they're not trying to find common ground. That they don't even want to find common ground. There's already something there. This goes to are we addicted to offense?
Come on.
And so there's that righteous indignation where it's like, no, I already know that you're wrong about this, and I don't care who you are as a person or any of that stuff. Not interested in trying to get to know you. I just want to shout at you, yell at you, let you know that I completely disagree with this, and that's the main point. And then if you're coming at it like that, there's no way you're going to find middle ground. Because you're coming at it so hot that no relational equity, no nothing. Let's just lock horns and go at it.
Yeah, you're going to entrench their position.
Yeah. So I'm reading a book right now called "The Coddling of the American Mind" by Jonathan Haidt, and one of the things that he talks about is, do you guys remember the march in Virginia? With the white supremacists that Trump got in hot water over. I feel like it was in Virginia.
North Carolina?
Maybe somewhere in that area. And there were some white supremacists marching. There was neo-Nazis, KKK there. And the Black Lives Matter decided they were going to show up and kind of counter protest. So it's pretty hard to find this on the news, but it's in his book. So the white supremacist had a whole stage set up, whole deal. Black Lives Matter were kind of over to the side, and the leader of Black Lives Matter, they weren't being aggressive or anything. They just were holding their fists in the air. Just that's what they were going to do. Well, the gentleman who was leading the other movement, he stopped their protest and invited up the leader from Black Lives Matter. And he said, hey, we want to give you guys time to say what you want to say. Now, you might say some things that our group doesn't like, but this is the United States of America, and we want to give you all a platform to speak. And so the guy got up there, and Jonathan Haidt does an awesome job of like narrating this story. And you could tell that when the gentleman from the Black Lives Matter got up there and he said, hey, I'm an American, people were like, woo, He said
Group identity.
Yeah.
Yep.
But he said, what separates, he talked about young African men being killed, and then they kind of got quiet. And there was this little bit of back and forth, over a period of minutes, but the guy from the Black Lives Matter ended up getting them worked up to where they were like, we agree with this guy.
Okay.
And then you can find the pic. It's kind of hard to find them, but you can find them online. There's pictures of the leader of the Black Lives Matter group, and then like a biker from a 1% neo-Nazi group. And they're like talking, hugging it out. And one of them is holding the other kid's, the other guy's kid. I mean, because they found common ground,
Group identity.
Yep. And I think that's one of the things that we've lost in America.
Yes.
And I don't really, it's tough to put your finger on it, but it seems like it's become more pervasive. My hope right now is that it's become so pervasive that we're just like, all right, look, can we just step back for just a second and like really value the person next to us, no matter what color they are, no matter what color their hair is, no matter if they're wealthy, poor, no matter what pronoun they, can I just like see that person as a human being and try to just bring that expectation first? Like I want to bring, just like we were talking about the Nick Saban practice, the first thing I want to bring when I meet somebody is that they're a human just like I am. Like I want to start there at that expectation level and get away from all this, anger management, from the microaggressions to trying to figure this out, trying to figure that out, and just be like, hey, if we're going to sit down and have a conversation, let's sit down and have a discourse. Let's talk through it. But at the end of the day, I still want to love you and respect you as a human being.
You matter like I matter. You matter like I matter. You just work from that thing. You matter like I matter. And I want to keep your humanity in focus. And I think what would be so incredible is to just encourage people. And it takes some gumption. In a world where we're getting our own facts and we like to be so insulated by everything that we already believe, we're constantly having our biases confirmed.
Yeah.
Is this: be intentional this quarter, this year, just in 2025, go to lunch with somebody you disagree with. Just go to lunch with one person you disagree. You disagree with them, or that you've seen them behave or post on social in some ways that have really frustrated you, but you have enough, some kind of correlation to that person to have them over for dinner, go to coffee, just dare to connect and watch how much you end up having in common with that other human being.
Oh, yeah.
That's way more than the few areas you might disagree. And if you have enough health in your conversation to dare to talk about the issue itself, you might actually find that there's some more facts, some more understanding that might make a whole lot of sense as to why that individual feels the way they feel, whether you ever agree or not, think it's a good idea or not.
Yeah.
But you might have a lot more empathy about why they feel the way they feel. And that's common ground.
And I think there's a point where you don't throw your pearls before swine, or, there's no reason to escalate because it's going nowhere.
What does
know
that
what I
mean?
mean?
Throwing pearls before swine.
That offends me.
Yeah, I'm highly offended. What does that even mean?
I'm offended.
Well, I didn't.
That sounds like King James.
Yeah, I didn't think about aligning somebody with a swine, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, well, you're wasting your words, So why escalate?
Like, what does that beautiful phrase mean to you in your use of "don't throw your pearls before swine"? I think it's a good thing to unpack. What's the waste there?
When somebody's unwilling to learn, a man convinced against his will remains an unbeliever still. Like you're not getting anywhere by arguing the point. You can't even do open dialogue with some people. You can't fix stupid.
Yeah.
So I think then at that point you just have to hug it out and don't escalate and just.
You're going to lead with that.
You
can't fix stupid.
Yeah. Well, you're just going to have to leave that battle for another day. I mean,
what you could do is you could get that on a T-shirt.
Yeah, you can't fix stupid.
Yeah, and just wear the T-shirt, and then it can just go on.
That's already been done, I think. Yeah.
I think it's really cool, and I love that you brought it up. Willard calls that an act of love. So we're not calling anyone a swine, but why would you offer something or someone something they have no appreciation of?
Yeah.
It's about kind of keeping their humanity or their context in view.
It's not that you wouldn't offer it.
Right.
It's just that it's not going to be received.
It doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything. So you're wasting words, and it doesn't mean it's not an unloving act. Mm-hmm. It's like, we're going to save this battle for another day, and I care about you.
Willard says that the implication there is feed the swine, feed them, give them something that they
just not
would
pearls.
Appreciate. Right? Yeah, they have no appreciation for that.
Yeah.
So, and again, we're not calling anyone a swine, but it's the idea of that if I really
anybody that doesn't think like me could be categorized
swine,
and that would be me and Cliff.
Yes,
often,
definitely,
yes, often.
No, the idea though is like I really believe the fullness of humanity is not that I outrage.
I thought we were talking about swine. Oh, but go ahead. Sorry,
we're getting there. But like the fullness of humanity, human flourishing, I think we all would agree to some degree involves loving well. Like for me to be the best possible human I can be would include growing and loving well. Loving well would be know the context of what someone might appreciate or not appreciate. Try to meet them in the things that they care about. Try to meet them in that place. Again, love well, not necessarily outrage well.
Kissing a pig or something.
Yeah. My wife does that all the time.
So let's talk about resiliency just a little bit. So I own Tunco, run the business. Paul, you're in a leadership role where you're at in multiple facets. Royce, you're part of the team.
Living in a van down by the river.
Yeah, you're living in a van down by the river.
He is a motivational speaker.
But you're actually coaching our group now, so you're like right in the middle of seeing what the culture's like and where things are at, and how is it healthy, is it unhealthy, and if I'm just speaking from my own heart, like what I struggle with in this whole what I would consider a soft culture mindset is that it doesn't seem like it has a lot of resiliency, and that people don't bring like what we were talking about with the Nick Saban thing. They don't bring that kind of expectation into their life. Like I feel like a lot of people are just trying to get through life to get whatever the next thing is. So you see that, I mean, I went to Costco this week. I hate Costco, but sometimes I just have to go there. And I'm like, people are going through, and there'll be one lady pushing 3 buggies. And I'm like, unless you have an army of people at your house, there is no way you need half of that stuff. And so my frustration is that when you're trying to coach and you're trying to lead a high performing championship culture, and people are always pushing back and like wanting less performance, like how do just coach me a little bit, like right now, right here on the pod, like how do you
keep them from being offended or what? Yeah,
because you're telling them specifically, this is where you're missing it. Mm-hmm. And maybe you've said that in a kind way 5 times and they never picked up on it. So you're like, okay, I got a couple options. One is I trade you, so you go play for a different team. And 2, another one is let's raise the bar here. So I find that incredibly frustrating in this, it's so easy for me to be offended whenever you raise your voice or to lift the intensity.
As that's back to kind of a biblical principle where Jesus was talking about 30, some 60, some 100. Same seed, same effort you put into somebody. And some fields you get 30, some you get 60, some you get 100-fold back. Well, you could spend your whole life trying to make a 30, a 60, and a 60, 100, and just frustrate yourself. Or you can slot people where they want to be. Mm. Give them a role where they want to be. Your champions rise to the top. Your hundreds are hundreds, and treat them like 100. And a 30 wants to be a 30. They've picked their lane. You're not going to make them into something they don't want to be. So it doesn't matter how frustrated you are or what you put into them. They've got a level they've chosen. So I think finding champions is more then you know that you can have a culture where you demand high things. But if you haven't got the right person, you're just frustrating them and you.
So in that scenario, you trade them.
I would, or just not. No, I'd value them for what they want to be and what is 100 for them. Right.
Yeah, but what if they're they value for where they want to be, but they're the motherfucker that's always dropping the ball at the goal line.
Put them in another seat. Yeah.
Well, why would I do that? If I brought him
because there's a point where they probably wouldn't drop the ball at an expectation level. So, I mean, you don't necessarily have to just get rid of somebody, but you might not be able to elevate them to a position where they're in that level of responsibility.
But then, so for me, what does that say to the rest of the team? Like, what does that say to the person who's putting in the work and they are delivering at a high level? What does that say to them?
What, the other person got demoted? I mean, that's fair.
Okay.
You're not promoting them.
Well, I know we're in a good conversation, so I've been listening. I would just say there are a few things that we have to make sure of is that we're consistent with what a win is. We have to, and if we are, we are. But I think a lot of times I have found, and again, I'm not saying this about Tunco, I'm just saying it in general, trust is such a huge part of someone's performance. People played for Nick because they trusted him and they trusted his championship caliber approach of what a win is. And I'm finding, even in some of my own failures as a leader, the need to unpack where the distrust was. But I also want to concur with what you said, some 30, some 60. Not everybody is going to create a 100% return. So there is a, like, where you are on the bus. I think sometimes that's a part, but like, what do I mean by trust is, and I know this could sound, I don't have the time to unpack it, but it could sound a little fuzzy-wuzzy for business, but every human interaction builds trust with someone who helps raise your joy. That could sound like, oh, let's just have fun and be fluffy. No. You're just someone that I enjoy working with and I enjoy being around. So it's like there's that balance that this person, I trust them because I know they're committed to my success. I think that as an owner or whatever, right? Because you want your company to succeed, right? You're invested. You're probably as invested or more invested than anybody in the whole company because you own it. When people that I'm coaching, I need them to trust that what I'm saying is not just for my benefit. Mm-hmm. And that's not at you. It's just that people are going to draw that conclusion because of outrage culture, coddling, lack of resilience. I think we are more suspicious in this freaking age than any that's ever been because we have more knowledge than we've ever been. We've heard more horror stories. And so we're always on the defensive. So I want to disarm, but still have the high standard.
Yeah.
Still go for the high standard, but it's also for your success, not just mine. Whoever the coach may be, right? Nick wanted those players to go play in the NFL, but let's get a championship at Bama at the same time. But they knew that if they did both, what it was going to do for their life. And
I think we also elevate people to positions too quickly. Like you take somebody that wears a suit nice and has a piece of their resume looks like they know what they're doing. But you've not worked with them, and then you sit them in this slot that you have this expectation for that's massive.
They're not ready.
and they're not, and they don't perform to it, and you're like, what, Well, I think that's why it's so great to promote from within, because you know what you're getting, right? You give somebody a task, and they perform faithfully. You give them a role, they perform faithfully, then you give them a position. When we take somebody that looks the part and stick them in the position, that becomes a very frustrating move if, because your expectation is understandably high, but they haven't run with you, they don't know the culture, they don't know your expectations, they haven't worked with you, so now you're the one. That's on you. You promoted them too fast, trying to get there too quick.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point, and I have been guilty of doing that.
Haven't we all?
Even
How do you
if it
think
was
I figured
somebody
out that speech?
You're speaking from experience, right?
Same here. Prioritize talent. You see the talent,
yes,
but they don't
the
have
potential,
the experience.
Yes,
to use the old the scripture, the ancient scripture, the word iniquity. I'm sure you've heard of that. It's like an old word. It sounds like I'm doing some sin. Well, iniquity actually implies it's grown crooked, and it's agricultural. It's that a bough or a branch got weighted before it had the resiliency to manage it. So it actually grows into the burden put on it. And I think a lot of times I've been really upset with people who grew crooked, and they grew crooked under my care because I identified their talent, and they really weren't ready for that responsibility.
Promoting people based upon talent versus performance and time over time.
And it takes a minute. Like those old-fashioned, like little slower growth processes build capacity and build resiliency. But you got a superstar, you weight them really heavy, and there's so much in that they're not fully ready for, that we actually kind of get them into almost a perpetual failure loop.
Yeah.
because they just didn't build enough capacity to handle that weight.
Yeah. So
That's
I think
a trust thing too, actually.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the critical things for our organization at Tunco, with you coming in coaching, is there is so much depth in coaching. Like when we talk about a Nick Saban organization, I mean, he's the guy that gets the credit, but his coaching staff is chocked full. I mean, you can go through college, universities, NFL teams that Saban worked for Saban, worked for Saban,
Yeah.
worked for Saban. You know,
It's a tree.
yeah, correct. Yeah,
Saban's
yeah.
tree.
It's massive, and I'm not diminishing his talents at all. What I'm saying is to have that culture at that level, and again, everything we've been talking about offense, he's dealing with those students that are coming in, and I'm sure a lot of those players are prima donnas because they've been, you know, at the top of their game for all
I
of their.
guarantee you he's a master at confrontation, though. Privately, not just while the cameras are rolling.
Yeah,
I mean, he's a guy who can square off on somebody and walk away with the result that both of them need, not just an offense, because he's a master at it.
And in the mastery there, at least one of the aspects
Trust.
would be he doesn't break their trust when he
Yes.
corrects them harshly or strongly.
yeah.
I'm still, I still
not-
treasure you. You're my man.
And I'm shocked at, and I'm talking about that is a skill, like in some of my harsher corrections that I took time. I fasted, I meditated, I read books, I got counsel, and I'm like, all right, I'm going in and
got it.
trust will never
Yeah.
be broken. And I severed a relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I went in as prepared as I knew how, but we have to talk about this. Sure. And I could just put it all on them, but what good is that?
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not blaming myself for everything, but I got some aspect of that, man, I probably could have done that even better.
Yeah.
if I
So in
knew
that
more.
world, even though we're talking about an offensive, soft culture, that's a scenario where even in light of that, as coaches, we still have to be super prepared
Yes.
to make sure that we're building in trust, that we don't have this significant trust wobble, as Francis Frey from Harvard would say. I think it's very important that we're intentional in coaching. And I think for me, from a work perspective, that very much closes the gap, that relational building in the relational credibility that you talked about earlier. That happens in those coaching moments, not necessarily corrective coaching, like, hey, you did this wrong. Like, hey, let's come alongside and talk about this, because I think that can create a distrust as well. If your coaching game is kind of more on the critique side than the encouragement side.
Pay for
It's
it.
got to be. Yeah.
Yes, you got to.
Yeah.
I believe in that, and that's a joy-based thing. So let's raise your joy because you're killing it here.
Yeah.
But now we need to talk and spend some of that joy and talk about areas if you're going to continue greatness. And one more thing I would say that I have found that worked really good with me is when, and I've seen it work with my coaching as well, is seeing someone who really wants to grow, and you see that they have capacity, and you're building that trust and rapport. Ask them, do you want me to coach you hard?
That's good.
Can I coach you hard? And at that point, it's almost like you're really offering something to them, going, hey, we can move this along, but if you'll let me, I'll coach you hard, but you also trust, right? I'm in because we've built all this to this point.
Yeah.
And when they sign on the dotted line, I don't want to surprise them with such a horrific, like it's a horror movie coaching, but it's like, I'm coming after you
Yeah. Right.
in a loving way because I see the greatness in you.
Yeah.
And I find that when they give permission, instead of maybe just being surprised by some of
good.
my moments of
No,
intense
that's really
coaching,
good.
they're like, hey, I signed on for this. This is what I want, coach. Let's go. Talk to me.
Yeah. You're
Give me
level
more.
setting the expectation as well.
Give me more.
Yeah.
And when coaches have done that for me, when they chomp on my backside, I'm like, well, I asked for this.
Yeah.
And I need it. And thank you, coach.
Yeah.
But instead you get a chomp on it, and I didn't really sign on, or it eats at the trust. And it's not because anything was just horrifically done wrong. It's just that we got to guard the trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, we started out talking about people's reaction to things, and then we kind of got off on like how
so
you
offended at you
deliver
right
it.
now.
How you deliver it matters just as much
That's right.
as the reaction that you get.
Yeah, so it's easy to get in that place where you're like, hey, I'm just going to blame the offensive culture.
Yeah.
Because it is a thing. But if we're going to be leaders, whether it's business, life coaching,
Gotta
whatever,
rise above it.
Yeah, we've still have to level set the expectation, and it still comes back to coaching, building that relational credibility, and really trying to make a difference in the world, not turn around and just playing the blame game, because that's what's going on from the other side where we opened this.
I wish I had pom-poms right now at what you're saying.
We could probably find you some.
Well, no, seriously. That's
Get up.
Well, and you got so many people you're talking to.
he's smiling.
Yeah, he's smiling. He's smiling.
There's so many people you're talking to, and all of them have there's a threshold for offense for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, the greatest performers, there's a threshold, and the lowest performers. So you're still going to have a kind of leadership that's sensitive to that, to delivering a hard message that's needed to be heard for someone, not just for you, but maybe for the vision and maybe for them.
Yeah.
You're going to have to master that. You know what I mean?
Your greatness is going to be in direct proportion to your capacity for blame. Because at any moment you want to check out on blame because it got hard, and you want to just go on your whole offense addiction, you're limiting and putting a ceiling over the greatness you're capable of. Leaders don't sit in blame.
So say that again. Your greatness.
Yeah.
Your greatness is going to be in direct proportion to your capacity for blame.
How long you've been holding that in your pocket?
Man,
you've been working on that.
I
for a
just
minute.
made that up just
You
now.
didn't just make that up.
That
You've been sitting on that for a minute.
That bullet's been in the gun. Woo, that pistol's trembling over here.
He's cocking
No,
it
but
real
the
slow.
idea,
Yeah,
right?
he is. He's like,
No, the pom-pom moment I was talking about a minute ago is what you were saying, is that leaders, you look at all of the great people, they had so much potential capacity for blame, but they refused to sit in it.
yeah,
And what they became was someone who's like, I don't want to extinguish what I can be if I just ignore this easy stopover of this temptation of blame.
Jim Collins' book, what do you say about a leader that's humble? When he receives a compliment, he looks out the window.
Mirror in the window.
Yeah, in the mirror in the window. And then when he receives a critique, he looks in the mirror.
That's right. But a level 4 leader does it the exact opposite. He looks
Yeah.
in the mirror when everything's
Yeah.
going well, and he looks out the window when
Yeah.
everything goes wrong. And that's
Yeah.
the difference between a level 4 leader
Oh,
and then
level
these
5.
really incredible leaders at level 5. It's that
They own
shift.
it. They own the problems themselves. I can create
me.
the culture. That's the
Think
way
about
I
that.
am.
You just offended me right now. I am so offended. I'm offended at all.
I'm a humble leader. See,
Yeah, I'm blaming all. That's what y'all are the reason I can't do anything great.
all right. Well, let's get out of here and try not to be offended. It's been another episode of Misfits Social Podcast. That's a wrap.
great to be with y'all.
See ya.
Bye bye.
Offended.